The question for today is, let me get up here and look. How do we work with the challenges of our life at a given juncture with gratitude and acceptance without losing our place in the larger stream of our life? We are those of Kuo, and we greet you, my dear brothers and sisters, in the love, light, and energy of the one infinite Creator, the author of all of our souls, the consciousness that weaves us together into service, and the sacred love that gushes through our desire and pushes our sails farther and farther towards the horizon. Our deepest thanks to those assembled here for offering your energies to this working as we are in some condition of bridging this circle's normal connection between our principle and its normal vibratory stasis. You are becoming a group that can count many accomplishments as under its belt as you move forward. For we do not come into clear recognition often as a principle when we make our telepathic contact with other seekers. Our purpose is often to provide the most comprehensive record of the Confederation's thoughts and ideas for the review of entities such as yourselves. And in doing so, this obviates the need to contain our message within one vibratory frequency alone, as more specialized contacts may do. Contacts with which your group may have more experience. This instrument has been careful to avoid sixth density contact so as not to take on more than he can bear at a given juncture of seeking. And this is caution well articulated and promulgated into the illusion. But we feel the time has come to reintroduce ourselves to this circle, to offer a spectrum of wisdom and loving concern that can pass over many areas of inquiry within the Creator's carefully constructed contact with its own illusory nature. We ask that you recognize the illusory nature of all questions at some level, and that the answers also slice off the unity and provide it for the consumption of a moment. Our words, our thoughts, even our love, my friends, cannot simply be taken in and that's the end of the story. We must insist on careful study and pruning of those errant ideas which were not our intention to deviate your mind with. You have an important role to play in ensuring the sanctity and we correct this instrument, single pointedness of our issuing message, such that you have agency to pick out what is for you, what suits the moment or the greater stream of moments of which you have provided the label life. We intend to show you a way of addressing yourself to such information that will bridge the gap between the moment and the eternal flow of energy that is as close to unity, to the stillness of oneness that we can conjure into your imagination with our words. We simply ask for your help in this so that our freedom to span over multiple areas must not keep us confined to a steady guard against infringement. Let us jointly guard against infringement by using our discernment, keeping the vibrations of this working high, and carefully listening, not just for things that affirm, but things that seem off. They may seem off for a good reason that teaches. They may seem off for a reason that is more, perhaps you might say, insidious. And yet, all of these experiences of the errant thought are good training for the adept, the serious and committed seeker whom we wish to be in more harmonious alignment with. Thank you for exercising your discretion in consuming the information we will provide this afternoon. Now, it is our pleasure to address the concerns you have raised in your framing question. Our mission is to provide the cleanest mirror possible for the reflection of one's true nature. Because our principle spans over multiple densities, we believe we provide something of a baseline condition for reflection, with a fourth density contact, a fifth density contact, or even a sixth density contact. You have mirrors that show you particular sectors of consciousness, all of which are a part of you. However, when teased apart and studied in depth with focus, you may recognize aspects of your own beingness you may have neglected to incorporate into your approach towards life. And in showing you this aspect of a band of consciousness that might have slipped by your awareness, you may gain a clue as to a new way to use imagination to continue the seeking project that we, as well as you, hold in such high esteem. It is all very, very good experience for you. With our presence, we wish to range over a wider span of concerns about seeking. The concern for this moment has to do with the sense in which the entity in front of the veil feels trapped by the conditions of a moment. One has to first recognize that one's judgment is grievously askew here in any kind of appraisal of one's progress on the path. For in this third density illusion, my brothers and sisters, you are not given to know your exact location. And therefore, there is no reason not to give one's fullest and most complete effort to seeking at every single point in time. For each moment holds such promise for the seeker. It is verily, as those of Ra have described, hiding that golden gate to the intelligent infinity in which all possibilities splay themselves out before you as a great offering of majesty and nobility, a royal reflection of your true nature as the Creator. And it would be well, we believe, to not neglect to mention that in this present moment, however confining and crowding it may feel, there is love. There is the connection to your overall sense of purpose. Even in the small, narrow confines of one's worries and fears that keep one feeling that the moment is a kind of trap that distances oneself from the overall seeking stream that seems all the more distant the more one has dipped into it. For one, in dipping in, dips out. Now, this in and out motion below the waterline of consciousness above the waterline reflects the pattern of consciousness in so many aspects that it is difficult for us to pull one aspect out as a special subject of focus. Nevertheless, to address your question, we will attempt this and speak of the way in which the path will have a bend in it, such that one seems to walk at a 90-degree angle to one's purported objective. This is the nature of the linear path, my friends. The way in which the illusion of separation provides a kind of binding continuum that is traversable. In order for the illusion of separation to fully be appreciated, each separate object must be approachable in some way, even if that distance to be closed seems of cosmic proportions. No, there is still the possibility of the closing of the distance. And this possibility brings what is proximate into total alignment and harmony with what is distant. You may, with profit, review some of your philosophers on this matter. For there is much in the illusion that discloses its own illusory nature. The contradictions are immense because in a figment of imagination, there is no need for consistency. There is no need for absolutes to be absolute. They are all limiting constructs. They provide the illusion, the sense to the seeker of place. But there is only one place. They provide an index into the continuum of time that seems to give you a memory and a destiny. These two are illusions, for there is only one moment. And it is useful even to have the intellectual acceptance of these ways of relating to the illusion that provide one with chances to break out of those confines, break out of the figment of space and time, and to recenter in the greater drama of creation. This is work well done, for in doing this, you give yourself a foothold in two seemingly separate realities at once. This is largely, we correct this instrument. As we have stated through past contacts, the role of the wanderer in particular is to keep, we correct this instrument, is to straddle between the overall flow towards unity and the momentary flow towards a less seemingly cogent or promising goal. By keeping your feet in these two realities and continuing to relate to your fellow mind, body, spirit complexes here in this illusion, veiled from a more complete foothold in reality, you do great service, for you provide a kind of translation for the deeper conditions of seeking that can be related to others in ways that inspire and that help them see the illusory confines that the present moment seems to erect for them. This is useful for one further reason as well. For it provides you with some idea of how you may provide this translation service to yourself. For you will lose faith at times, and you will feel that throwing good effort after bad effort will not always crack the nut and bring you back into that feeling of harmony with the overall trajectory of your life. So how may you serve yourself in this narrow sense? That sense being to give yourself inspiration and to remind yourself that the greater project dwarfs the annoyances or hindrances or stray tragedies of a given point in the illusion of time. The first suggestion we would make in this capacity that we occupy is simply to remind you of the potency of meditation. Our brothers and sisters of Hatan have a role in this message, my brothers and sisters, for they wish you to know that the tediousness of seeking, the rote nature of the daily meditation that all Confederation sources suggest, is part of the lesson. There are many tedious aspects of life in third density because you achieve such a refined focus on the object of your perception that you recognize hardly the projective nature of that perceptive opportunity. Conditions of seeking are always moments of projection, as our brothers and sisters of Monka have iterated time and time again. The issue with projection is not that it is a problem or some sort of mistake. In fact, we would reiterate their point that projection is inherent in the closing of distance between pieces of the Creator that ensure the continuity of the project of reunification. This is quite important, for you would have no way to reach out to the seemingly other self without this projective ability to link up, even if just in the matter of senses or in the creation of a personal perceptive illusion that frames this other self in just such a way. Consider then that projection is a way in which you shoot yourself forward into a kind of new aspect of the moment, if not a different moment. It is a way in which you feel about and gain gain an appreciation for emplacement. This is largely an aspect of the bodily complex, the aspect of your beingness that has positionality in time and space, and therefore gives you the feeling that your projections, whether they be actions upon the illusion or responses to the illusion, regardless, they connect with that illusion and create a sense in which your existence, the necessity of your beingness has purchase in the fields of the Lord. And you may see your own existence clearly, even if the characteristics of that existence are wildly skewed and blocked. The fact of existence precipitates from the emplacement of the body. And this is a strong, strong illusion that anchors you in the experiences of your life. Sometimes this anchoring will feel so powerful that you will feel as if it is a vortex that separates you from a more visceral feeling of being in the wider experience of seeking, one in which lessons accrue and seem to sequentially push you towards that distant, soft focus glow of unity that somehow enlivens your heart and is impossible to imagine. You, therefore, have good reason to feel bound by the present moment. It is hardly an aberrant perception of yours. You simply learned ways in which to abide with it. And the discomfort you feel in this is quite educational, my brothers and sisters. This discomfort is a kind of gauge, shall we say. If you were more in touch with your total beingness, a momentary discomfort, a momentary feeling of traction in a given point in time would simply be a notable detail. And this would simply be interpreted as data to be compiled and digested. Your resistance to fully digesting the depth of this feeling is a clue to what the moment is attempting to impress upon you. For as we said earlier, what is that overall stream of life but the aggregation of these moments, these insights into oneself that give one greater opportunities and a greater sense of the flow of energy through oneself, such that the traction one feels is not to some test of the entity, some challenge to be accepted or to be grateful for. But instead, the traction one feels is in a dynamic rush towards a beloved endpoint that one has relished and anticipated in the back of one's soul for lifetimes. What we are attempting to point out here is that the self as a mind-body-spirit complex craves traction, and that the feeling of the moment not fully giving you the freedom you desire is merely one kind of traction. For when one is swept along in the greater evolutionary stream, that too is impossible to fight against. And that is part of its appeal, is it not? That the quotidian decisions of one's life have lost their import in the greater understanding of returning to the Creator. Therefore, this gap may be bridged through a tool we have exposed you to many times. And now we finally return to our brothers and sisters of Hatan's intended point, which is that old answer to the timeless question. To change your projective mode through meditation. And we wish to provide a little more than just an exhortation to meditate. For this circle is well aware of the gist of the matter there. In meditation, you have taken the projective nature of consciousness and inverted it. Suddenly, what is providing traction is something infinitely far within rather than infinitely far without. This is a curious feeling when it is first experienced by the seeker, for they recognize the relationship they have to the infinite, that they are a point that is infinitely focused, but also infinitely dilated. It is a unity. And whether that unity tumbles out into a linear experience, one direction or another, it is the same unity. The difference with retreating, shall we say, to the reflections within are that they are somewhat more familiar. By this we mean they have the scent that you have come to recognize as a personality. And it is that mundane personality of third density alone that provides the sense of familiarity. Certainly, one can find the alien, the unrecognizable, the unfamiliar within the self. But this is not typically the experience of meditation per se. For in meditation, one is settling into what we correct this instrument. One is settling in to what one has previously established as the self, the locus within infinity. And therefore, one can loosen up a bit and recognize that this traction is not negotiable. And the acceptance of the self can provide a template for the acceptance of the outer conditions. Just as the experience of catalepsis, inherent in the seeming outward, we correct this instrument, the seeming inward valence of catalyst only calls into one's consciousness those biases that one holds within and which give one the sense of what the self is as a unique portion of the Creator. This task of meditation may sometimes seem to not provide all of the reassurance one may seek, because this is not about getting a foothold, you see. This is about recognizing that one doesn't have a foothold at all, that the traction one feels in the present moment is illusory, and that there is a greater current that is moving about one, that is pulling one along. It is simply necessary to recognize that the seemingly confining conditions one encounters without have their antithesis, so to speak, in the unlimited conditions within. And that this is the key to reconnecting with that broader stream. For those grounding conditions one finds within the self have much less to do with cornering you into a lesson, and much more to do with reconciling yourself to a lesson. Catalyst is not balanced out there, my brothers and sisters. It is balanced within. However, it is necessary for some reason to then register this balance without, once it has been achieved within. And this provides the leveling of the trajectory, we correct this instrument, momentum of the pieces of one's life, such that one sees that though they all seem to travel at different speeds, the orbit is the same. The center that pulls these different strands together is one center. And that center, when it captures the focus of consciousness sufficiently, is the thread to pull one back into the feeling that there is a greater purpose obtaining in one's life. This is not easy, however, and it is not supposed to be easy, my brothers and sisters. We have not revealed to you here some sort of trick or get out of jail free card. We are telling you something that you already know. The meditative mindset dissolves much of the rational thinking that leads one to corner oneself in the outer conditions of illusory reality that you call physical reality or yellow ray reality. Those realities shall still be present before your gaze, naturally. You will hardly reprogram the entire array based on a whim. But you can see those limiting aspects of your life as features of the motion-filled orbit that we have described earlier as a stream. Your life only seems linear because you measure it moment by moment. Offer yourself another vantage point. Its beginning is within. And when the daily meditation seems tedious, when it seems that you are loath to discipline the mind, go easy on yourself, but do not give up. There are many different ways to be a seeker. My brothers and sisters, you may choose any of these. What you choose, however, will require some sort of commitment. And when that commitment becomes onerous, you have the option of releasing it and choosing another. However, when you do this, recognize that you are losing that foothold that gave you the ability to bridge between the overall purpose of your life and the momentary purpose of life. And that will feel discombobulating. That you will feel like you are floating with no traction. This is a very pregnant time in the seeker's life, this sense of floating in midair. For one does not get this visceral experience of infinity, of infinite selfhood, very often. And it may even be difficult to ground. It may even lead to some panic. And so we do not advise that you simply let go of the limiting conditions of life willy-nilly, but to instead let your meditation show you the operating manual for how to access different parts of the life experience. The wonderful thing about meditation is that it encloses you completely in something that you have already decided is the self. And then you are prepared, after a longer or shorter period, to face the self out there, the self that must be more cautiously projected towards. Cautious only because of the illusion of a limited self. It is the setting of a limited self that provides the lessons for an infinite creator. And you can dip in and out as many times as you like. This is what is intended when the daily regimen of meditation is suggested, for we of Kuo understand quite well that you do not need to be cajoled into living in the physical illusion. This comes naturally through your embodied state. Simply remember that you have an alternative, and that wherever you feel stuck, the alternative viewpoint that projective consciousness affords the seeker is the key to getting unstuck. And then, when you are in the flow of a larger concept of your life purpose, revisit the moment, bless it, and be grateful for how it verily released you just then. For there is, in reality, no difference between that small moment and the larger current of life. It is all of one piece. It is all available to the seeker as a possibility of being a creator in the illusion, which is what all of us are here to do. We are those of Kuo. We feel we have rambled a response to this answer for a sufficient length of time, and we hope that this instrument will trust that it had some cogency to it. At this time, if we can provide further help, further ideas for your consideration, we would ask that you address those questions to our principal. We are those of Kuo.
We appreciate your thoughts on self-inspiration, on projection, on tractions. To get a bit deeper on the concept of tractions, Max asks about your ideas on overcoming shame and on self-forgiveness.
I am Kuo. I am in receipt of this question and believe I understand. The concept of shame and the corollary need for forgiveness of self is one of the attractive items that keeps one trapped in the illusion. You will recall that we spoke of a familiar self and an unfamiliar self that characterizes the two directions of projection of consciousness. These are very pat ways of describing the directions of projection. For there is that within that is unfamiliar, and that without which is familiar. And the self, in navigating the lessons it has programmed in its life, will find at times that this unfamiliarity has surrounded it. It cannot reconcile its concept of its own personality with the actions or the surrounding conditions of the didactic catalyst it seems to be engulfed within. And therefore, there is a kind of core rejection of where one is at that has great similarity to the floating in midair experience we related earlier. For when one is free of the confines, one has no traction. We correct this instrument. One feels one has no traction with which to set out in a direction. But when one is ashamed and harsh with the self, one does not let one out of traction. One is frozen in the uncomfortable but familiar setting that the illusion has trapped. We correct this instrument. That the illusion seems to have trapped one in. We would suggest that the questioner understand that one has a feeling of familiarity only illusorily, and that one must become, in some sense, an other self to oneself, to provide an alternative to the terminal feeling of shame. We say terminal because shame tends to arrest forward momentum on the seeking path, to stay safe, or at least as safe as one can imagine is possible. And this will lead one to further act in ways that reinforce the safety of this limiting illusion, rather than looking through the illusion of safety to the possibilities beyond simply a defensive or protective attitude. And with enough time, this will become a pattern that reinforces itself, much as the sinkhole of indifference does more generally in the conditions of polarity. One wishes not to be who one is, and yet one occupies an illusion in which one can only be that oneself. This must be healed, not simply sidestepped or escaped. When one feels ashamed, one simply wants no longer to be what one has found oneself to be. But one must accept oneself in order for that momentary lesson to be truly integrated into the larger stream that will then provide the context for forgiveness, the context for the necessity of the suffering, and the greater setting in which one's momentary dead end of selfhood was but a small piece of a dissolving illusion. Of course, one way to work with this is to treat others as one would wish to treat the self, and to issue that forgiveness with abandon and heart wherever one finds its receipt welcome. Forgiveness is an energy that does not require a context. It is a careful releasing of the self from the confines of the moment, because it recognizes how made up the moment really is, and that whatever was mistakenly done, it was the only thing that could have been done at that point of being that self in that context at that time. It is frustrating to have to face a self one has rejected. And we can provide only the guidance that taking one's time with self-forgiveness is good advice. For you cannot simply force yourself to move on. Where would you get the traction to exert this force? You must become familiar with that portion of yourself of which you are ashamed. More familiar than you would like. But in this familiarity, in this exploration of this marginal part of the self, one finds the infinity of possibilities. They may not unveil themselves immediately. And it may be some time before you can find a familiarity within that can abide with these pieces. Again, this is why a daily regimen of going within and balancing these items is so useful. But even if you do not do this, simply start. Simply start to sit with that which you find hateful, unacceptable within yourself. This instrument objects a bit, for the advice appears to be to simply do the thing one finds one cannot do. But remember, meditation is not the projection to do something, to effect some change, like the projection of living in the outer reality. Meditation is a more passive projection that shines the light within the self in those places, both celebrated and uncelebrated. And then, when one has found something to work with, one does no work in truth, but simply occupies a seat next to it. And in sitting with it, and letting it share its vibratory nature with you, you are pulling down the wall you erected within yourself. And that can start to dislodge the obstacle. You may not fully achieve this self-forgiveness in this lifetime, but there is such a healing quality to returning the perspective to the greater project of one's life, that even a small amount of healing attention can yield great progress to the seeker. Does this address your question sufficiently, my brother? We are those of Kuo.
Well expressed and much appreciated.
We thank you, my brother. Is there another question to which we might address our principle? We are those of Kuo. Very well, my brothers and sisters. Thank you for reestablishing contact with our principle on this day. This is hard to express, but it is a gigantic leap forward for this instrument, who feels the contact has contained the quality he has not felt in some time, and some of the shame of imperfect practice on his part has been dissolved with your patient and loving help. We have attempted to impress upon him the true import of the regimens he practices, so that glitches here and there need not overtax his concerns. And you have played a role in grounding this lesson within him. We hope that we will make your acquaintance once more. And until that time, we will now leave you in the love and the light of our one infinite Creator. We are those of Kuo. Adonai, my brothers and sisters. Adonai.